Hi, I'm Doug Boynton, and you're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, where we highlight the week's news and stories happening in our region. Happy New Year, everyone. In this week's program, age demographics are shifting in Hampton Roads, and that's not a good thing if you're running a college or university. We spoke to schools about how they plan to handle a potential drop in students. Old Dominion and Virginia Commonwealth universities will use a $9 million grant to study cancer prevention in neighborhoods with low-income housing.
The combination of where you live, income, access to food, access to affordable care, health, literacy, all of these things are interacting together.
And the world's first nuclear fusion power plant is being built next door in Richmond. We'll learn what that will entail. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Happy 2025. This holiday, commissaries at bases around Hampton Roads were open to Defense Department employees. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says it's part of a delicious, yet important test.
The military commissaries at Langley, Eustis, Little Creek, Fort Story, Naval Base Norfolk, Naval Air Station Oceana, and Norfolk Naval Shipyard are each part of a limited trial run. Civilians working on base are allowed to use the stores for the first time. The Defense Commissary Agency runs more than 200 stores around the world, catering to troops and their families. They are subsidized by the federal government to offer discounts. Like other retailers in recent years, the commissaries have faced stiff competition from crowded retail markets in places like Hampton Roads, as well as online retailers. A 2022 Government Accountability Office study showed sales have dropped worldwide since 2015. The test runs through March. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
The number of 18-year-olds in America will start declining next year, a demographic shift colleges are calling the enrollment cliff. WHRO's Ryan Murphy talked to local schools about how they plan to deal with the drop in potential students.
Old Dominion University Provost Brian Payne says the stakes of enrollment drops for many colleges and universities are clear.
The financial implication is that for institutions that are dependent on tuition revenue, they're going to have to figure out a way to offset those losses.
Schools are exploring ways to keep enrollment up as the number of high school graduates is set to decline. At ODU, Payne says growing graduate program participation will be key. Virginia Wesleyan University started an international online program years ago in anticipation of the cliff. That now enrolls 5,000 students, more than triple the university's in-person enrollment. And Tidewater Community College has tried to lower barriers for potential students with measures like on-campus daycare. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Virginia's elected officials are looking to expand access to weight loss drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy in 2025. A patient can lose as much as 20% of their body fat, but high demand has led to high prices. WVTF's Brad Kuttner has more.
It's called GLP-1 or glucagon-like peptide 1. It's a molecule that's produced in your body after you eat. For diabetics, it can bring down your sugar levels alongside insulin, but the other side effects include making you feel more full and delaying the emptying of your stomach so you're not hungry for a longer time. As states look to tackle obesity and the costly health problems that come with it, they're expanding access to GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy in the name of public health.
The number of obese people in Virginia and the country, if you really want to move the needle in dealing with that, these drugs are one part of that equation.
That's Henrico Delegate Rodney Willett at a recent press conference. He hopes to see Virginia reduce the body mass index required for those with federally funded Medicaid to access the drugs. But they're expensive, up to $1,000 a month. Dr. Juan Pablo Arab specializes in liver and digestive issues at VCU Health. He said he sympathizes with the idea that we should be telling people to eat better and exercise more.
That's true, but we have been trying to do that for the last 70 years in the medical field, and we have not been very successful.
Arab thinks increased access could not only address short-term weight loss, but also long-term adjacent medical issues like hypertension. Willett said there's still specifics to work out, but he's hoping to tackle the issue when legislators return to Richmond in January. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
Paying off tax debt can be difficult for people who are having a hard time making ends meet. And when state tax officials hire private debt collectors, the methods can get controversial. Virginia Public Radio's Michael Pope reports.
Brian McNulty did not know that he owed thousands of dollars in back taxes to Virginia when he got an unexpected note from his payroll department.
Well, I got home, checked the mail, and it said that Virginia State had garnished 100% of my wages for taxes. And I'm just blown away. 100% is, it's all of it, and so your livelihood, and, what do you do?
Delegate Carrie Coyner is a Republican from Chesterfield County who says the government should not be able to garnish 100% of anybody's paycheck.
Why work? Why earn money when I can't keep any of it? So it does. I think it's a really common sense approach. It ensures that people do have their taxes repaid, but it also encourages people to be able to continue working.
Her bill would create some protections, making sure that people can earn a bare minimum salary, even if they still owe a tax bill to the Commonwealth of Virginia. It might make paying off that debt take a little longer, she says, but it won't ruin people in the process. Lawmakers will be debating her bill when they gavel into session in mid-January. I'm Michael Pope.
Old Dominion and Virginia Commonwealth universities will use a $9 million grant to work on and study cancer prevention. They'll focus on neighborhoods with low-income housing in Hampton Roads and Richmond over the next 5 years. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson spoke with Dr. Bryn Sheehan, the Director of Research and Infrastructure Service Enterprise at Virginia Health Sciences at ODU, and one of the research leaders at the Future Center.
Dr. Sheehan, thanks for joining us today. The Future Cancer Control Equity Research Center will focus on cancer prevention services for people living in federally subsidized low-income housing in Hampton Roads and Richmond. How is cancer currently impacting that population of people?
One of the main projects in this ASSERT Center is focus on social drivers of health. That's what this project is aiming to do, is to acknowledge that there are systemic barriers that can be changed, hopefully with multi-level intervention attention. It's not just your income that is making you at higher risk for certain cancers or certain other diagnoses even. It's the combination of where you live, income, access to food, access to affordable care, health literacy. All of these things are interacting together.
In addition to helping those folks, is the center hoping to learn anything?
Absolutely. That's what makes this center and this grant really unique. Normally, for a research proposal, you are required to detail about 99% of what you're going to do. This project is so strongly based in community engagement and in community involvement that ideas were outlined and ideas of interventions that have shown to work in other communities were detailed. However, we know the details of how it will be implemented, maybe some adjustments to the intervention, these will need to be changed based on the community. So it's a really large community partnership feedback that will actually change some things about these interventions and how they're implemented in order to be the most successful in these communities.
The announcement of this center talked about addressing social drivers of health, like food access and affordability, increasing physical activity, and even helping people get access to technology like Wi-Fi hotspots and tablets. How did those things tie to cancer prevention?
All of them are working together to place some people at higher risk because nobody lives in a silo with one influence. We're constantly walking around with our genetics influencing us, our decisions influencing us, our community barriers that have been developed and are still in existence influencing us. For example, one of the interventions with the Social Drivers of Health project, Jessica LaRose, in her work in Petersburg, learned that part of the nutrition and exercise wellness program, so one of these factors that is successful is walking. And it was really well received in the community. They worked with that community to make it work for them so that they had walking paths, formed groups, very successful. That will look very different in the Hampton Roads income-based housing communities. We know from other research we've done, many residents don't even feel comfortable walking a block away from their building. So again, we don't know the details of how this will look now because we're just beginning to get the feedback from our community members. So we're bringing in known scientifically sound cancer prevention research strategies to communities and adjusting them to meet the needs of the community.
Thanks for your time, Dr. Sheehan.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, 3rd District Congressman Bobby Scott further hints at a run for governor. But first, more sailors will be allowed to live off their ship as Congress tries to address the living conditions for younger troops in Hampton Roads. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
Last January, Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy James Honea told Congress the Navy didn't have enough room to house 800 sailors per aircraft carrier, which forces them to live on the ships. The latest defense bill allows the Navy to give a housing allowance to any unmarried sailor, says Senator Tim Kaine.
We want to send a message that dignified housing is a high priority, and that's why these investments are so important.
The services have been under pressure to improve conditions for its youngest troops. $16 million is earmarked to rebuild barracks at Oceana. The Air Force will receive $82 million to expand the dormitories at Langley after all F-22 training was moved to Virginia. Not included in the defense bill was a Navy proposal to privatize all barracks in Hampton Roads. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
A team of engineers and veterinarians, including some from Virginia Tech, are developing a device that can destroy brain cancer tumors in dogs. Eventually, they hope to adapt the technology to use the method to help humans, too, as WVTF's Roxy Todd reports.
Brain cancer is very difficult to treat in both humans and dogs. So a team of researchers are working on a way to shrink tumors with focused ultrasound.
And so this could revolutionize surgical approaches to certain kinds of cancer if you don't actually have to make a surgical incision.
John Rosmeisel is a neurologist at the Virginia-Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine. For several years, he and a team of mechanical engineers have been adapting a histotripsy device to treat dog tumors.
So it's using sound waves that are focused down to a single point in the body to create bubbles.
Eli Vlisofovich is one of the Virginia Tech engineers on the project. He helped develop a histotripsy device that was recently approved by the Food and Drug Administration to treat liver cancer in humans.
Similar to like when you boil bubbles in water, you're just doing the same thing with pressure. So you take a tumor and mechanically destroy all the cells.
They hope to eventually develop a handheld device that's inexpensive and easy to use.
So not only improving it, but getting it to patients everywhere, whether that's animals or humans that need it.
Rosmeisel says they are accepting more dog patients as trials for the treatment continue. I'm Roxy Todd.
3rd District Congressman Bobby Scott continues to tease a possible run for governor. We get more from Michelle Hankerson.
Scott posted a photo of himself on Monday with ministers and community leaders to, quote, discuss important issues of concern. Punchbowl News, which covers Capitol Hill, reported earlier that the 77-year-old Scott was looking at challenging 7th District Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger for the Democratic nomination for governor in 2025. Punchbowl quoted party sources concerned with Spanberger's ability to excite black voters. Scott says he hasn't ruled out challenging Spanberger for the nomination. Whoever wins the Democratic nomination for the Virginia gubernatorial race will likely face Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears next November. Sears challenged Scott for his congressional seat in 2004. Scott won that race with nearly 70% of the vote. Scott is now the dean of Virginia's congressional delegation and is the top Democrat on the House Education and Workforce Committee. He would likely become the chair should Democrats retake the U.S. House in 2026. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
Dry January is the idea that you take a break from drinking alcohol for a month. WVTF's Brad Kuttner spoke with researchers who say it's a good idea even if you stop for just 1 month.
Heads up to those who imbibe. Dr. J.P. Arab, Director of Alcohol Sciences at VCU Health, has some bad news.
Now we have extensive data showing that there is no benefit of alcohol and there is only harm.
Arab's focus is on liver problems. He's seen patients without other symptoms walk into his office because they've suddenly turned yellow from jaundice, which means their liver is shut down, often from alcohol abuse. Arab said there's no nerves in your liver, so you won't know until it's too late. But even if you're not sure you've got a problem, it may be a good time to try Dry January just to find out.
I will not drink alcohol at all during January to be mindful, of why I'm drinking, what are my patterns. And then some people may realize that they were, heavy drinking.
VCU professor Francesca Lynn has taken part in Dry January a few times. Sometimes her friends were doing it. Other times she lost a loved one and didn't want to fall down a worse path. She still drinks occasionally now, but she can see why it might help those who need it.
If you want to do something and stick to something, then maybe it's not the alcohol, maybe it's goal setting.
On a side note, bartenders told me January is their slowest month, so if you order a mocktail in line with your Dry January experiment in the next few weeks, consider tipping like it's top shelf. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
A controversial provision in the newly passed defense budget will affect military families with transgender dependents. The legislation says the federal insurance plan for troops and military retirees will no longer cover gender-affirming care for people under 18. As Andrew Dyer reports for the American Homefront Project, families and their advocates are scrambling.
The only harm that's coming to my friends or people I care about that are trans is transphobia.
17-year-old Xander lives in a small beach town near San Diego. His father's a retired Navy officer, and Xander is covered by military health insurance, TRICARE. Xander is trans. For his family's safety, he asked we only use his first name. Even without coverage for gender-affirming health care, his mother, Robin, says she thinks they can absorb the added cost. But she's worried that thousands of military families can't.
It's going to be hard. They're going to have a child in distress. They're going to have a really unhappy child. And I don't know, my heart breaks. I'm very worried. I'm very worried that there are kids that are going to be physically harmed because of this.
The federal provision echoes laws in 26 states that ban gender-affirming care for children and teenagers. Republican Congressman Doug LaMalfa of California spoke in favor of the provision from the House floor.
Children should have the chance to grow up without being subjected to experimental procedures that can cause permanent damage to their bodies and futures. These are minors we're talking about here. And what business is it of the Department of Defense to be engaging in this?
But the claim that this gender-affirming treatment is harmful is rejected by every major medical organization. Kathy Molig is the founder and director of Trans Family Support Services, a San Diego-based nonprofit. She says trans kids receive counseling and mental health care well before doctors prescribe any medication.
This has been approved care by the medical associations, by the pediatric associations, by the psychological associations as important medical care for gender dysphoria. And so when we withhold medical care from anybody, we are creating harm.
San Diego Democratic Representative Sarah Jacobs serves on the House Armed Services Committee. She says the anti-trans provision wasn't in the version of the bill that their committee negotiated. She voted against the defense budget, even though some of her priorities, like a military pay raise, were included in it.
Our military families are not calling me about drag shows. They're not calling me about these culture war issues. They're calling me about the housing they need, the childcare they need, the healthcare they need to keep themselves and their families safe.
Xander, the 17-year-old, says lawmakers should start listening to trans kids.
A lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I've talked to who are trans, they have felt so much happier after transitioning.
He says his transition via the military healthcare coverage he's about to lose was a revelation.
A lot of people think that it's gender dysphoria that defines being trans, but a lot of times it's gender euphoria, as in like they don't know that it's an option, but when it does become an option, it's like, whoa, this is so much better. It's almost like putting on glasses if you have like really blurry vision or something like that to me.
Xander's mother, Robin, says the coverage ban is especially cruel because military kids have to move, change schools, and make new friends every few years.
They're called dependents, but I think they're the bravest of all because they're making a sacrifice that they didn't choose to make. And now their country is turning their back on them. It hurts.
Republicans in the House this summer failed in a broader effort to strip insurance coverage for gender-affirming care for everyone covered by TRICARE, including troops and military retirees. Advocates are preparing for more anti-trans proposals to emerge from the Trump administration. Reporting from San Diego, I'm Andrew Dyer.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans. The 1976 election that put Jimmy Carter in the White House was one in which Virginia was an outlier. As Michael Pope reports, Virginia was the only southern state to not go Carter's way.
Jimmy Carter swept the solid South in 1976 with one exception, Virginia, which went for incumbent Republican President Gerald Ford. Here's Howard K. Smith making the call on network television.
ABC News projects that President Ford has taken Virginia and its 12 electoral votes. This comes as no surprise because an early October Richmond Times-Dispatch poll, Ford led 7%. Virginia to Ford.
Virginia may have gone to Ford, but John Milliken at George Mason University's Schar School says Jimmy Carter carried parts of Virginia that were culturally Southern, places like Martinsville, Patrick County, and Henry County.
Northern Virginia was suspicious of Carter because he was an outsider, because he was making noises about being skeptical of big government. And Northern Virginia in those days was big government.
Ford won Fairfax County and most of Northern Virginia, robbing the Carter campaign of a clean sweep through the not-so-totally solid South. Michael Pope.
The world's first nuclear fusion power plant is set to rise up in Richmond. WHRO's Catherine Hafner explains how a Massachusetts company plans to do it.
Fusion has long been called the holy grail of clean energy. It has the potential to produce huge amounts of electricity without releasing climate-warming gases.
If you look in any science fiction book or movie anywhere in the future, what you'll see with respect to energy is humans have mastered fusion. And it's because it's not just the next energy generation source, it's kind of like the final one.
That's Rick Needham with Commonwealth Fusion Systems, a spinoff of MIT that's behind the Virginia project. Fusion is a nuclear reaction that powers the sun and other stars. It's difficult to replicate because you need extremely high temperatures and a magnetic field to contain everything.
We're trying to take that reaction and bring it down to Earth and put it in a bottle in a controlled place.
Needham says they're using new superconducting magnets they hope will get the job done at a commercial scale for the first time ever. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Communities around Hampton Roads are spending big on major youth sports facilities in a bid to boost tourism. WHRO's business reporter Ryan Murphy explains the economics behind it.
Hampton opened a nearly $30 million aquatic center in 2022, and Virginia Beach opened a $68 million indoor sports facility in 2020. Mary Fugere, who runs Hampton's Visitors Bureau, says a lot of parents would rather forego a trip to the amusement park than cut back on their child's sports.
Youth sports is nearly economy proof. It is a market segment that has stood the test of sequestration, COVID, all sorts of economical downturns.
Families spent $52 billion last year on kids' sports. Now, other cities are trying to capitalize on that dedication. Williamsburg, James City, and York counties broke ground this summer on a joint $80 million facility that will host basketball, volleyball, and other sports. Meanwhile, Norfolk is eyeing a possible ice facility for hockey and figure skating at Military Circle. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Steve Walsh, Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Nick McNamara, and Michelle Hankerson. WVTF's Brad Kuttner and Roxy Todd. Virginia Public Radio's Michael Pope, and Andrew Dyer with the American Homefront Project. Thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.